Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to you, each and every one of you that is. I do hope you're doing incredibly well. I'm doing fine, thank you very much, and so glad to join you this evening with another fabulous story. So before we settle down to a lovely story, I hope you're going to get yourself a special drink, and if it's unusual, let me know about it, as I love hearing from you. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, Victoria Swanepoel was known as Vicky, or Vix, by her friends, something which had displeased her mother immeasurably over the years, as she was insistent that her daughter was addressed by her full appropriate name. Mrs. Swanepoel didn't like the name Vicky, but try as she might to perpetually remind her daughter's friends that it wasn't Vicky, her name was Victoria. Indeed, poor Mrs. Swanepoel had corrected anyone who was listening, time and time again, from teachers to a pastor at the local church. But it hadn't worked. It had been like beating her head against a brick wall, as Victoria's friends unfailingly shortened her name to Vicky, and even worse, Vix. Let's just say her husband had warned her all those years ago, when they had named their daughter soon after she was born, that her name would likely be shortened. Not on my watch, she had insisted, but eventually she'd given up. So in Victoria's life, the only people who ever called her by her original name were her parents and now her current boyfriend Robin, who Mrs. Swanepoel had fallen in love with almost immediately when she heard him address her daughter by her full name, Victoria. "Robin, you're the only person who calls my daughter Victoria, aside from my husband and myself. May I ask you why?" To which he had responded with an impassioned eloquence. "Your daughter, Mrs. Swanepoel, is a queen, just like Queen Victoria was, so her name should be spoken in full. It would be preposterous to shorten such a regal name. I'd never call her Vicky. That would certainly be an insult." From that moment on, Mrs. Swanepoel, whose heart was not easily melted like butter over a hot steaming waffle, had decided that Victoria's boyfriend Robin was a real keeper, and she told her daughter as much. "I really like Robin," she told her daughter. "I don't want you to let this one get away. He's a real find." "Don't you worry," Victoria had laughed. "I have no intention of letting Robin get away. I know that even though I'm young, he's the one for me." It hadn't been easy to leave her home in Capitol Hill, Seattle, and move into a student digs, an apartment they were renting together. As being an only daughter, she was very attached to her parents, whom she considered her closest friends, but she knew she needed to gain a measure of independence, as she was so close to her 21st birthday, which was looming around the next corner. She didn't want to be accused of being tied to her parents' apron strings. That wasn't a cool, becoming look for a girl her age. Where had the time gone to, she wondered. It seemed like only the other day she was in first grade. Now she was sharing an apartment with 4 other students from the University of Puget Sound. She remembered a time when she considered her mother's age to be so old. But if time went by as fast as it invariably did, it wouldn't be long before she too would be celebrating her 40th birthday. She had even asked her grandmother once, "Granny, do you actually feel old?" Her grandmother had said, "No, absolutely not. Certainly not in here," she'd said, pointing to her heart. "But let's just say my body is not what it used to be. But that's where I feel my age. Not in my head, not in my heart. I feel exactly the same, only a lot more wiser." 2 of Victoria's very best friends were sharing the apartment with her, along with 2 other young students, Carmel and Jenny. It was fun living with a bunch of young students, and on this particular occasion, they were all gathered together around a television, having ordered pizzas. There was a woman on the television from Washington State being interviewed. "I've lived here in Tacoma all my life. I'm telling you, I've seen those things. I promise you, they really do exist." "How do you know, Miss Posey, that this is not a misidentification?" says the young man, holding the large intrusive appendage of the fluffy microphone head close to her mouth. The woman looks heartily annoyed with the interviewer. I'm hardly going to say I saw something if I didn't, am I? I'm so sick and tired of all the scepticism out there these days, and the ridicule. Look, I'm telling you the absolute truth. I was returning home one night from the theatre with my son. Well, actually, it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. We both saw it together, basked in the full glowing light of my headlights. I distinctly saw the face. It had a pyramid-shaped head. It was very human-looking, very, very big. It had deep brown eyes that gave off an orange-gold eye shine. "What did it do, Mrs. Posey?" The woman drew in a deep breath, as if she seriously wanted to throttle the interviewer and slap him across the face with a large frying pan. What was he doing? He was in the road. He turned around and looked at us directly. We made eye contact. "Do you think he was surprised to see you, Mrs. Posey?" Mrs. Posey is again looking at the interviewer as if he must have misplaced his brains, as they don't appear to be in his head anymore. Perhaps they're in his wallet. "Of course he was surprised. I hardly think he was waiting in the road to make my personal acquaintance, do you?" she says churlishly. "These creatures are evasive, reticent, reserved and timorous, so no, I don't think he was actually hoping for an introduction with me." "Were you scared at any point, Mrs. Posey?" No, I wasn't scared. I was more shocked. The creature looked directly in my eyes. I could see the warmth in his eyes, a genuine kindness. We had a moment. "A moment of what, Mrs. Posey?" asks the interviewer. Mrs. Posey becomes a little belligerent, heated under the collar. "A connection. Look up the word in the dictionary if you don't know what it actually means. I told you he had kind eyes, a gentle benevolence, a profound emotional intelligence. A creature like that is not going to attack you unless he's provoked. Like a human being, it possessed sound reasoning." "Do you think he was dangerous?" Mrs. Posey looked offended. "Haven't you heard a single word I've just said? I told you he had kind eyes. He was emotionally intelligent. I hardly think under the circumstances that he was dangerous. Of course he could be if he was challenged, or someone pointed at him with the barrel of their gun. I don't doubt then that he would lose it, and become aggressively reactive, and then, yes, you would be in grievous trouble. That creature could take your head off with one swipe of his hand. I don't doubt that, based on his Herculean size. But he wasn't exhibiting any aggression towards us, just bewilderment in seeing us at all. I don't think he was too delighted to have been seen. It was late at night, well, actually early in the morning. The road is usually devoid of traffic at that time. The wind was blowing heavily. I guess the tyres of my truck were not that discernible against the blustering conditions, so he was caught off guard. My car just encroached on him unaware. I don't doubt if he had heard our approach, he would have deserted the scene faster than greased lightning. Those creatures don't want to be seen by us, and given our human behaviour, I can't actually say I blame him or them. If I were wearing his shoes, I would also hide in the shadows." "You saw him too, with your mummy, I gather," says the interviewer, addressing a cute-looking 10-year-old boy, with green dinosaur-like spikes running down the central panel of his head. He had large dimples on his cheeks and very bright, earnest hazel eyes. "Do you think he was real? Or was he a man wearing a Bigfoot suit trying to scare you, do you think?" The boy looks at the interviewer in astonishment, as if his suggestion about someone wearing a Bigfoot suit at that time of the morning was senselessly half-witted and exorbitantly farcical. "I don't think anybody would wear a Bigfoot suit on the road at 2 o'clock in the morning, sir," he says. "Also, he was too big to be human. We both saw him. It was a Bigfoot. We saw the muscles under his skin. We knew he was real." "Were you scared of him, young man?" asked the interviewer. "Or are you a very brave boy, do you think?" The young boy again looks at the interviewer incredulously, with a look of, "Are you really that thick?" on his face. "My mother told you, sir. He had kind eyes. He wasn't aggressive towards us. He looked at us, and then he glided away. He seemed nice, like the dragon in Warren and the Dragon series. I don't know if you know the books. The one who likes marshmallows. You knew he was nice, sir. Like Warren's dragon was nice. You just knew it."
So there we are, a sight here in Tacoma, Washington. Two people who swear they encountered the hairy man, otherwise known as Bigfoot, at 2 o'clock in the morning, on their way back home from the theatre. So what do you think? Do you think they encountered the hairy man we call Bigfoot?
Right, like we believe that for a second, says Lisa, taking a swig of her beer. Where do they get all this feather-brained stuff from? They must think we swallow anything we're told, that we're completely naive. For goodness sake, everybody knows Bigfoots aren't real. They're just creatures of fiction. You mean you don't believe their account? Asks Victoria, looking at her friend in surprise, as she takes a bite of her pizza. Strings of mozzarella cheese dangle down the edges of the slice. I think the witnesses are incredibly credible. Why would they make all this up? I personally believe their account. That's because you're gullible, Victoria. You believe the very best in people. I'm a lot more discerning than you, I have to say. I think they saw something else that they thought was a Bigfoot. A case of mistaken identity. You know what your problem is, Lisa, says Victoria. You've always been so clever, and that can be your biggest undoing. You're like those opinionated professors out there that arrogantly think they know everything there is to know about everything, and everybody else in the entire world is so stupid, when in reality they might be academically bright, but they often lack an intuitive awareness and connection. They think they know everything about religion, everything about politics, everything about science, when in reality they know nothing at all, because they're so closed-minded and they're not open to possibilities. Just because you don't believe the witnesses' accounts does not mean that they're not actually telling the truth. I believe them, says Sally Ann, 100%. I know they're telling the truth. You can see they're profoundly moved by the experience. It could have been someone in a Bigfoot costume, says Lisa. I'm sorry, Lisa, but now even you're being ridiculous. It was blusteringly windy out there. It was cold weather. You think someone is going to stand in the middle of the road wearing a Bigfoot costume on the off chance they might stumble across some witnesses at 2 o'clock in the morning? I think that's a ludicrous suggestion, if you don't mind my saying so. Well, the Bigfoot costume would keep them warm, pipes Lisa. I imagine wearing all that, you're hardly going to suffer from hypothermia, are you? How do you explain the huge size of the beast? Robin pipes. Are you telling me they can make costumes that increase your height to 8 foot tall and 4 foot wide, Lisa? Give me a break. You know what the problem with you academics around here is, like you, Lisa, is you're all so bloody scathing. You never believe a thing. Why do I get a feeling that all of you are ganging up against me, says Lisa, just because I don't believe everything I hear? Well, I believe they exist, says Victoria. Little did she realise that soon she would uncover the truth to this mysterious question, and even her cynical friend Lisa would be forced to admit that the forests here in North America clandestinely cover up multiple secrets that many of us could never fathom were remotely possible or even plausible. But let's just say, seeing is believing. Victoria was blindly oblivious to the fact that on the celebration of her forthcoming 21st birthday, something outlandish was on the precipice of being birthed, that would leave an indelible footprint on her life, that could never ever be erased from her memory, her mind, or her wistful recall. 6 weeks later, Victoria's story. I'd organised 12 friends of mine to come on a day's hiking trip to celebrate my birthday on the Eagles Peak Trail, a steep trail from the Nisqually River, where the head of the trail begins at the Suspension Bridge, on the east side of Logmire, through old-growth forest, with fabulous views of Mount Rainier, Nisqually Glacier and the Tatoosh Range. Me and my best girlfriends were very fit, keen walkers, passionate lovers of the great outdoors and of the natural world. But it seemed even living here in Washington State, our hesitant feet had not ventured very far and wide, and the intrepid adventurer buried within each and every one of us had been somewhat suppressed and subdued over the years. But now it was almost begging to come out, like the bird in a cuckoo clock, to be fully galvanized. It had been my inspirational, electrifying decision to invite my 12 close friends on this hike, to celebrate my forthcoming 21st birthday. But sometimes even your good friends can let you down when you least expect it, in ways you never imagined possible. And at the very last minute, I hasten to say. I was to find that this morning was going to be sullied with a dark cloud cover of disappointment when my cell phone began to vibrate. Little did I know these discouraging, vanquishing phone calls were going to flatten the mood of my enthusiasm, deflate my ebullience, and wantonly rob me of my hopes for the hiking trail that I'd been looking so forward to for weeks on end, and preparing for physically. The all-day hike on the Eagle's Peak Trail in Mount Rainier idea that I had randomly spouted to my friends one night had been received with rapturous applause and unbridled enthusiasm. "What a brilliant idea!" they'd all chorused. "You can count me in. Wild horses wouldn't keep me away." Well, at the least I thought it was a great idea, until one by one, almost all 12 of my friends whom had accepted my invite began to turn me down at the very last minute, with the most nonsensical, harebrained excuses that carried no substance of weight with me, and were soiled as far as I was concerned with the tarnished spoils of a spurious deception. It was curiously bizarre. I couldn't make any sense of it. I'd received an incessant ribbon of phone calls a day before we were about to leave, within minutes of each other. It almost felt like a conspiracy. The first call came from my friend Kirsten. "Hello, Vix. It's me, Kirsten. Oh, about the trip to Mount Rainier. No, can't do, I'm afraid. Only gone and sprained my wretched ankle. The doc says I need to rest the thing. Oh, it's such a bummer. I won't be able to come, but don't worry, I can come to the restaurant the following day, when we're having the real celebration. I will hop there if I have to," she chuckles. I remember even after the first phone call, thinking that Kirsten was behaving so strangely, the way she talked about her ankle, and it certainly didn't sound genuine. It was almost as if she was reading from a script, even overacting. If Kirsten wanted to be persuasive, some acting lessons wouldn't go amiss. She wasn't fooling me for a second, but I chose not to bat an eyelid. I knew she hadn't really sprained her ankle. It was a fictitious, far-fetched, premeditated story, but she clearly had her preconceived reasons for choosing to bolt at the last minute, like a frightened horse from its paddock. What was going on? "I'm sorry you won't be coming," I say. "As you say, it is a bum, but your ankle has made the decision for you, it seems. But at least you'll be coming to the restaurant the following evening, so I'll see you then." "Seems like that," she says. 10 minutes later, my caller ID lights up again. My cell phone vibrates. It was my friend Bridget. There was a huge pit in my stomach, as an ominous, unsettled feeling overcame me. Was she calling to cancel me as well? Now it was 2 down, 10 to go. It reminded me of that nursery rhyme, 10 green bottles hanging on the wall, and one by one they all accidentally fall. Were all my friends going to wantonly abandon my invitation, that had been once met with so much enthusiasm, but now everyone was getting cold feet about the hike? It was only a hike, for goodness sake, not a trip to Jupiter or Mars. This was not looking good. "Oh, it's me, Vix. It's Sue. Sorry, I won't be able to make the trip to Mount Rainier. I was so looking forward to it. Really, I was. But something's just come up. Sorry, it's personal. I can't talk about it at the moment, I'm afraid. I'm not privy to divulging any details." I sighed. Nothing had come up. The trouble was she couldn't find an excuse, so she was shrouding her deception in the convenience of an obsequious obscurity. Then 12 minutes later, after it, the phone rang again. This time it was Merrill. "I'm so sorry, Vic. We've had a dreadful disaster at home. The exterminator had to spray our apartment. It's been infested with cockroaches, so I'm moving in with my grandmother for a couple of days. She lives in another state, I'm afraid. Won't be able to come. Besides, I did breathe in some of those noxious, toxic fumes. I think my lungs might be permanently damaged. I am worried about that." "I'm sorry to hear that," I say, sounding so nonchalant and indifferent. "I hope you get the roaches under control." Are you kidding me? In the morning, all 12 of my friends were game for this trip, and now they were running away like rabbits diving into their burrows, frightened off by a fox. Let's just say I had never known a day to rain so many excuses that came pouring out of the heavens, almost as if it was raining cats and dogs. Believe me, it can rain here in Washington State,
But this was a noxious fake rain that reeked of crafty, duplicitous cunning, monkey business, artful trickery. I didn't want to entertain any of these piddling, pathetic excuses that ranged from the ludicrously bizarre to the outrageously far-fetched and implausible. From I've got food poisoning, the doc says I need to rest up, to my grandmother's turtle has died, and she's having a funeral service for him on the day in question. I was lucky I had a thick skin, as I could have quite literally taken all this spurning repudiation quite personally, but I chose to not be affronted. If they didn't want to come to Mount Rainier, so be it then. It was their loss. I was rather bewildered, as we had talked about this must-do hiking trip incessantly on numerous occasions. It was pretty shocking, as we were from Seattle, Washington, which is only 59 miles south-southeast from Mount Rainier, and we had the impertinent audacity never to have been on a hiking trail there before. If I was Mount Rainier, let's just say I would be more than a little put out and disgruntled about that. I did begin to wonder whether the rejected invites might possibly have something to do with taking a steeper hiking trail. Maybe my friends were pretending to be fitter than they actually were, had possibly highly exaggerated their physical prowess, and did not want to be humiliated by admitting the trail was more than they could actually take on. I mean, let's not kid. People from all over the world flocked here to Washington State to view some of the prepossessing, resplendent scenic delights the Pacific Northwest has to offer. More notably, the arresting allure of Mount Rainier, that has held many a visitor here speechless with wonder. I had to laugh at the irony of ironies. It was amazing how everyone was available for the party the following evening, which involved alcohol and a plethora of champagne and bubbles. But no, they couldn't come on this hiking trip, not at all. My group was now whittled down to only 3 of us, whom appeared to be as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as I was to go to Mount Rainier. I would admit that my mood had dampened considerably, and the trip had lost some of its promising shine, like a pair of old leather shoes that no longer gleams as much as it used to. My boyfriend Robin had encouraged my flagging spirits. He was good like that. "Don't let it get you down, Victoria. People can be idiosyncratic. They can have strange motives over things. Why your friends are making so many excuses and a mountain out of a molehill out of everything, God only knows. But don't you dare worry about anybody else. You worry about yourself. You know you've always longed to go to Mount Rainier. Don't let a few loser dropouts spoil your fun. Besides, with 3 of you going together, it might be even more exhilarating, more intimate with the 3 of you. It would be crazy not to go. You've lived here all your life and never been to Mount Rainier. You know how insanely ridiculous that sounds. It's like a pirate never returning to the treasure he buried. It's madness." "You think so?" I say, looking rather beleaguered. "Absolutely," he says, shrugging his shoulders, running a large hand through his ruffled black curls, and looking somewhat reflective. "Never had any sisters myself. Never fully understood woman. All this pussyfooting around, all this drama, all these inventive excuses. It's ridiculous. I think men were much more inclined to tell the truth. Sorry, bro, can't come, not in the mood. But your lot, the extent of their imprudent artfulness is uncanny." Lisa, my academic friend, cynical about so many things, had stepped up to the plate and had not let me down. "Don't worry about the others, Vicky," she was saying. "They're just losing out, that's all. But I wouldn't miss this experience for the world." I glanced at her expression, and even she appeared to look as if her words did not completely ring true, as if behind the ebullient positive facade was a less than eager participant in this adventure. "I just can't believe all the excuses," I say to her. "I mean, a funeral service for a turtle, a cockroach infestation, and an ankle that is badly sprained. Everyone has a ridiculous excuse, and let's just say I don't believe any of them." "Don't let them bother you," she says. "I'm sure they have all manner of clandestine reasons they can't come. But don't be offended. It's not personal. For some reason it's less reckless to tell a white lie than to tell the truth. Sometimes I think it's this inbuilt desire in us to not upset someone. It's easier to say, 'I can't come because my uncle fell into the stew with the dumplings and is currently in hospital receiving treatment for 3rd-degree burns,' than to say, 'Sorry, I can't come. because I don't feel like trekking up a high incline. Well, guess what, Lisa? I'd so much prefer the truth. I don't want to come because the trail is too steep, and I'm worried about my fitness levels, or I don't want to come because I'm just flat out too exhausted and the trail would wear me to a frazzle. Would be a damn sight better for me than making up some of the baloney I've been listening to. Just call it creative expression, says Lisa. An opportunity to be inventive. But if you're going to make up an excuse, be comical, for God's sake. Say something like, I changed my lock on the door and can't get out. Would have been a wee bit more funny. I don't think there's anything funny about that, Lisa. I would have said, that's not a problem. I'll call out a locksmith for you. So that wouldn't work. But I get where you're coming from. If they're going to lie, try and be more creative about it. Having said that, having a funeral for a turtle was quite innovative in my opinion. But certainly not believable. For so long, I had talked about visiting Mount Rainier National Park. It offers over 260 well-maintained trails that lead through old-growth forests, river valleys, streams, fields of wildflowers, and a network of awe-inspiring glaciers. Mount Rainier is the largest stratovolcano in the Cascade Range of the Pacific Northwest, with snow cascading over its mountains all year round. It is the highest volcanic peak in the contiguous United States, with the largest alpine glacier system outside of Alaska, and the world's last volcanic cave system. It was a Tuesday morning when me and my friend Lisa and Sally Ann chose to explore the Eagle Peak Trail with me. We arrived at our destination rather early in the morning. Let's just say it was more than we'd bargained for, an upward ascent that was giving our lungs strain as we breathed heavily to catch our breaths, realising that mountain goats we were most certainly not, and our challenging sessions at the gym could not compensate or compete with climbing up this arduous trail. We had been warned that it would be tough going, but we were eager and enthusiastic about proceeding on our way, our moods ebullient, our hearts filled with hopeful promise, our eyes eager to feast on the fabulously arresting views we would encounter upon our way. Our innermost desires were to conquer this challenge, as it was high on our lists of goals. I had always thoroughly appreciated rising above a challenge. It offered within me that sense of accomplishment. We were the only 3 people on the trail that morning. There was no one else around. It was very silent. It felt as if the mountains, the trees, the alpine meadows were all ours this morning. We were all wearing walking shoes, windbreakers, and the all-important layers, which means you can remove or replace clothes. It was a beautiful spring day. Winter was now behind us, and was all but a distant memory, and this was one of the first days we'd actually been out in the fresh air, appreciating the soft rays of sunshine that so generously caressed our shoulders and backs with a pleasing warmth. We soaked in its sunshine like hungry lizards. The sky was a magnificent cobalt blue that day, gently feathered with a soft spray of fluffy white cloud cover. The terrain was so heavily littered with rocks of all shapes and sizes, in an ascending trajectory, which could be tumultuous, as without a good grip you could easily slip on some of those loose stones that commandeered and sequestered the path like a dried-up old riverbed. There were some wide-open spaces between the trees, and beyond the path a billowing alpine meadow, scattered liberally with red creeping ground covers, grasses and wild flowers in pretty colours, that literally danced against the gentle breeze. There were tall trees, namely mountain spruces, hemlocks and Douglas firs, I think they were, that lined our trail between the undulating heavy contours of the mountain. They penciled up into the skyline like tall skinny giants, covered in bountiful needled regalia and verdant glad rags. "Wow, this is steep," says Sally. "I can't believe the others turned down this fabulous trip, all because of a bit of superstition. It's preposterous. I wouldn't have missed this for the world." I stopped dead in my tracks, glancing over at both of my friends. I noticed Lisa's eyes are rolling at Sally, with that "now you've blown it" kind of look on her face. "What the hell are you two talking about?" "What superstitions?" I ask, looking quizzically from one friend to the other, who are both growing in varying shades of fuchsia. "Lisa, I'm sorry, I say, but what the hell is going on? Don't think I haven't seen you giving Sally that warning look. What are the two of you not telling me? Whatever it is, don't you dare fob me off. This is my 21st birthday, for goodness sake. Don't I at the very least deserve to know what's going on with all of our friends? An explanation for everybody's incongruous behaviour towards this trip might be nice for a start. I mean, it really was a blow to the guts, everyone turning me down at the very last minute with their whimpering, pathetic excuses. It really hurt, but Robin told me not to let it get me down. But let me tell you, it did. Let's sit down for a second and have a drink, says Lisa promptly, realising that I'm not going to be hoodwinked. She opens her backpack, pulling out 3 small bottles of Mountain Dew, which we drink in this glorious wooded sanctuary. The sweetness is so refreshing, and sitting down on the soft grass is pleasantly pleasing. I'm sorry, says Sally. I didn't mean to spill the beans. But most of the girls didn't want to come today. Nancy had a bad premonition about the trip. She thought something not so good could happen to us. Did she now? I say sarcastically, feeling an indignant anger surfing up in the back of my throat, on the waves of a putrid nausea. So she thought she'd infest everyone with fear, so no one would come on this trip with me, while not even having the balls to tell me why she wasn't coming. She made a pathetic excuse, I think it was, about babysitting her nephew. So what kind of premonition did she actually have? I'm really not happy to be the last person to know about this. Thanks a bunch for keeping me in the dark. She said it was just a bad feeling. You know the girls take her seriously. I mean, remember when Meryl wanted to put off visiting her grandmother a while back? Nancy told her she needed to go, as that would be the last time she'd see her grandmother alive. She was right. Meryl was so thrilled to be able to spend quality time with her grandmother, thanks to Nancy's intuitive inklings. Then there was that time she told Sue not to go out the following weekend with her brother. It turned out his truck was involved in a really bad collision, and the passenger seat was annihilated. That side of the truck was a total write-off. Let's just say if Susan had gone that weekend with her brother in that truck, she wouldn't be here now today. So everyone is inclined to listen to Nancy. She seems to be highly perceptive, very intuitive. She's got a bit of a psychic gift, I think you call it. Is that what you call it, I say? I'm now feeling so mad, I actually want to scream. You would have thought that Nancy would have had the decency to tell me about her misgivings, instead of lying to me outright so blazonly. It might have been nice of her to say, "Hello, Vicky. I've had a bad hunch about the trip to Mount Rainier." I might have actually listened to her, changed the date for goodness sake, so that we could have all taken this trip together another time. We'd been talking about this hike for ages. Everyone was itching to come. She didn't want to upset you. She didn't want to upset me. Are you kidding me? I've never heard anything so ridiculous in all my life. In other words, something bad is going to happen to you when you go on the Eagle's Trail, but I won't bother to tell you. You know that's crazy. Nancy says you call her premonitions mumbo-jumbo. She told you never believed a word of any of them. You just said they were coincidences. Yes, I did, but that still makes no difference. I would have fully appreciated not to have been left in the dark like this. That was a spiteful thing to do. I knew everyone's excuses were blatant lies. If I didn't have a rhino hide for a skin, I could have felt very rejected. I was still hurt. I glanced at both of my friends pointedly. Why did you decide to come, given what Nancy told you? That must have really ruffled your feathers. I'm bewildered you both didn't make up some spurious, ingenious excuses to fob me off, like everybody else did. I'm like you, says Sally Ann. I don't believe in all that gobbledygook tripe. I don't think Nancy's got any extraordinary special powers over the rest of us, nor does she have psychic ability. Let's not kid, we all have intuitions. I didn't get any bad vibes about coming on this trail today. For goodness sake, it's enchantingly magnificent here. What could possibly go wrong on a trail like this? I can't wait to see the egg on Nancy's face when we tell them all that nothing went wrong and that her premonitions were seriously warped. What about you, Lisa? Why did you come? Lisa flushes awkwardly. I didn't really want to come on the trip today, she admits. I'm not going to lie. I know that I'm a cynic normally, but Nancy scared me. She was so convincingly persuasive, spouting all that mischievous blather. She had me completely fooled, but I knew I couldn't lie to you. Besides, you looked so despondent, so crestfallen. I just couldn't let you down. Look, I say, if you want to call this hike quits, tell me now. We can always go back. I won't take any offence.
What has hurt me the most is everybody failing to tell me what was going on. But I don't want to call it quits, says Lisa. Nor do I, says Sally Ann. It's a beautiful day. Look at it. It would be crazy to go back, says Lisa again. Now we're here, everything that Nancy says is beginning to look like drivel, hocus-pocus stuff and nonsense. Besides, I don't have any discomposing, discouraging feelings about the trail. Are you sure? I asked the both of them. Absolutely, they say together in unison. I would be broken-hearted if we went back, says Sally Ann. It would make us the quintessential wet blankets. It really would. The three of us amble up on the enterprising, majestic mountain slope towards the prepossessing summit. The path is smoother than earlier on in our walk. The treacherousness of the rocks is overtaken by the perilous dangers of reaching a much higher elevation, where if you took a tumble, there would be a long way for you to fall. The voluptuous curvatures, rocky appendages of the mountains, with their rugged, masterful contours, sweep up against the skyline in pronounced sculptural resplendence, while trees, thickly dense with needles, especially on their lower branches, audaciously jut out through the soil in a verdant ascension, with an unrestrained, cheeky presumptuousness. When you cast your eyes upon the lower valley, it's like you're seeing an ocean of rocks being sprayed liberally with white foam. But what you're really seeing is the smoky vapour of the cloud cover hovering over the rocky outcrops. It's when we reach the very top of the trail and are watching everything around us for miles that me and my friends hear this terrifying, discomposing scream that seizes our attention. It's unlike anything we've ever heard before. The colour has quite literally drained from our faces. My legs begin to quiver like jelly. I look at Lisa and Sally Ann in alarm, and I hear it again. It sounds like a vicious, obnoxious roar. It seems to echo through the valley. The sound is airily haunting. "We've got to get out of here," pipes Lisa. "We need to go. Something's very wrong. Something's wrong. We have to leave now." Sally Ann is the more assertive, the pluckiest one among us, and not given to being easily persuaded to just leave. "Don't you want to see what's actually going on? Something's up here. It's making that god-awful noise. Don't you want to know what it actually is?" "I'm not sure I do," I say. "I'm not feeling desperately brave. I actually feel I'm going to wet myself," I say, crossing my legs so tightly. "I think I'm going to quickly go behind the tree over there. I'll be back in a tick. Don't go without me. Otherwise, I just will wet myself." I quickly hurry towards the tree. As I'm squatting down behind this mountain hemlock, that's when I see them through the branches. I can hardly believe it. They're two creatures, one that I can only describe as looking like a werewolf. And let's just say he was the ugliest, grossest thing that I've ever beheld. For a moment, I'm so astounded, I stop midway in my pee, wondering if I'm really seeing this. You've got to be kidding me. This sort of thing never happens to me. My life is routinely uneventful, exceedingly normal. But there is nothing commonplace, nothing normal about what I'm beholding now. I mean, werewolves. Who ever believed that such enigmatic, ambiguous creatures actually existed? The thing that struck me the most was the length of his arms. They trailed well beyond his knees. He had human-looking hands with pronounced claw-like nails that could do some serious damage. His face was exactly like a wolf, with pert ears and a wolf-like muzzle. The creature was about 7 foot tall, standing up on 2 feet like a human being. But it was what he was doing that demanded my attention. I kid you not, this bizarre-looking creature was having an incandescent altercation with an intimidating-looking Bigfoot. The Bigfoot was dauntingly enormous, preposterously so. I think he could have been 10 foot tall, 9 to 1000 pounds, and 4 foot wide across his powerful shoulders, that would make many weightlifters or wrestlers look pitifully puny. He was covered in long flowing dark hair, built like a heavy piece of farming machinery. He looked like the kind of creature that could not be taken down very easily. It would be like having a fist fight with a combine harvester. You're going to end up being seriously hurt. The Bigfoot let out a shrill whistle. It echoed over the valley. It possibly could have been heard for miles around, although you might think it was possibly a bird call. I could hear several whistles returning, but they seemed far away.
I got the sense he was calling for reinforcements, but he was so much bigger than this werewolf, it wasn't difficult to see who was going to win this battle. I'm still squatting down, not even moving a muscle, even though I've finished my ablutions, but I just can't look away, nor can I do up my jeans. The only way I can describe it is when you observe a fatal accident on the highway. You want to look away, you rarely do, but you can't, as an inquisitive curiosity is urging you to take a second peek, even though you know whatever you're going to see, it's not going to be good. I don't know what this fight was actually about, but I have a sneaking suspicion it may have been territorial. What I did perceive is an immense hatred between these two creatures, the likes of such I have never ever witnessed before, not even among human beings. Even watching it was so palpable, I could actually feel the hatred, as much as I could feel the whipping wind, as at this height there was a pretty boisterous wind blowing, and was flapping against the mountains, the trees, against our clothes, with a forceful efficiency. Indeed, it beat against my face, was feisty in its tenacity. The capricious werewolf-like creature looked as evil as death, as if he belonged to the dominion of hell, while the Bigfoot almost seemed angelic by contrast. It really was rather like watching the war between good and evil. The werewolf was snarling. His nostrils were flaring. His jagged, angry canine teeth were clearly on display. He was using all his resources to intimidate and subdue. The creature let out a vicious, guttural growl. Everything happened so quickly. I indicated for my friends to quickly come and join me. They tiptoed quietly towards the tree, squatting down next to me, to watch these extraordinary proceedings. We were looking at each other with eyes as wide as saucers. Like me, my friends were equally as gripped. I think fascination and intrigue had conquered our fear. Also, we knew these creatures were not after us. They were at war with each other. My friends are mouthing to me, "You've got to be kidding." Lisa had always believed Bigfoot was a creature of fiction. She was trembling with a mixture of abject astonishment and wondrous awe. I think we all felt we'd been propelled into some kind of alternative universe. We watch as the Bigfoot punches the werewolf directly in the jaw, with such powerful punches. He does this 2 or 3 times, and it looks as if the jaw of the creature is completely mangled. Several teeth come flying out of the creature's mouth. The jaw crumbles away, falling to the floor. The creature's still alive, but it's like he's spaced out. As his eyes roll back in their sockets, he crumbles in a defeated heap on the ground, like a camping chair that has lost its legs. The Bigfoot finishes the creature off with 2 more swipes of the fist. It's almost like his powerful punches are as effective as bullets fired from a high-caliber weapon. As the head of the werewolf comes flying off, the Bigfoot picks the headless creature up, throwing it over his shoulders like a large sack of potatoes, and then down the valley below, where it somersaults into the air until it vanishes into a hazy oblivion, disappearing and vanishing beneath a dense, cloudy vapour. "Let's get out of here now," I say, quickly doing up my zipper, dashing precariously down the downward slope, almost stumbling and tripping over myself in my earnest haste to get away. I don't want to hang around for a moment longer. We quickly move down the path as fast as we can, our breath heavy, our hearts flapping violently, and every hair on the back of our necks is standing on edge. We see a plethora of trees moving, not just from the wind, but something else is moving them. They're not just twitching, they're actually bending over. We hear heavy, ponderous footsteps charging up the mountainous ravine at a hectically dramatic speed that sounds ominously like bison thundering across the open plains. The ground is heaving, groaning, trembling under the heavy weight of whatever is approaching us at what seems to be in a tearing hurry. We see a couple of black silhouettes passing us, moving and weaving between the trees. I instinctively know that they're Bigfoot. One directly comes hurrying down our path, swinging its arms and legs vigorously, moving with an enviable agility. But this one is smaller. It's about 7 foot tall, with small breasts, and its face is profoundly human. On seeing us, she gives us a friendly nod, seems to smile at us through these congenial golden eyes, and then she's gone right up to the area where we'd been only moments earlier. How extraordinary! After our encounter with her, Our fear literally dwindles away. It morphs into an animated excitement. Did you see her? Oh my God! Did you see her? Oh my word, those eyes! Those eyes! Those golden eyes! They were so beautiful! Oh my word! They were incredible! She was incredible! As we make our way down the path, we hear these excited whoops. They literally infiltrate the whole valley, followed by a plethora of whistles. I think the Bigfoots are celebrating the demise of the werewolf. I can't blame them for that. It was the ugliest, grotesquest creature that I've ever beheld. You know what, said Sally Ann, when we reached the car. This was one hell of a hike. Our timing was perfect. 2 seconds out of alignment, we could have missed it all. To cut a long story short, when I gathered around my sheepish friends for my birthday party or celebration at the Palisade restaurant in Seattle, which had been around forever and a day, well renowned for its fabulous food, and during the day does boast spectacular views. All my friends arrive looking wonderfully dressed in their finest clothes. They drape me with a plethora of presents and cards. Kirsten runs to give me a huge hug, with no sign whatsoever of a sprained ankle. How's your ankle feeling, Kirsten, I ask, pointingly keeping a straight face and trying to look very concerned. Oh, it was dreadful. Gave me a lot of pain. But would you believe it? The pain seems to have melted away just in time for your birthday. It's those painkillers the doctor gave me. Bloody marvellous they are. Well, I suppose miracles can happen, I say scathingly. How about your lungs, Merrill? Have they been infected by the fumigation spray used on the roaches? Merrill flushes a bright red colour. Much better, thanks, she says. Much better. How did the funeral go for the turtle at your grandmother's place? I ask my friend Lorna. Oh, it went very well in the circumstances. I mean, my grandmother's very, very attached to that turtle, so we had to make a big thing of it, as you can understand. Of course, I say. All 11 of my friends are champing at the bit to find out exactly what transpired at Mount Rainier, and whether Nicky's premonitions carried any weight at all. But I wasn't going to make it easy for them. They'd have to smoke the truth out of me. Go on, says Kirsten. Tell us what happened at Mount Rainier. You missed a fabulous trail, I said. It was steep, quite treacherous, but the views, when you reach the summit, they're arresting, very bewitching. That's it, says Kirsten, frowning. She passes Nicola a cursory look. Nothing untoward happened on the trail, or even on the drive to the park. Like what? I ask. Well, you didn't approach any fatal accidents on the way, something like that. Nothing bad. What are you talking about, I say, looking nonplussed and exaggerating my surprise. Come to think of it, we did actually see something, I say. Kirsten's face lights up brightly. Yes, what did you see? We saw a werewolf and a couple of Bigfoots. There's a long pause, as all of my friends look at each other in abject disbelief. Is this some kind of a wind-up? You didn't see a Bigfoot, did you? A werewolf? That's crazy. Those things don't even exist. It's a pity you weren't there, I say, because now you'll really never know, will you? You'll always be left wondering. But I don't have to wonder about a turtle's funeral, a so-called sprained ankle, or a fumigation for cockroaches, because I know it's all just a bunch of poor excuses that have no foundation in the truth. But you on the other hand, were not with us on that trail, so you'll never really know what you missed, will you? So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.